Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another quarantine edition of the Jim Cornette Experience. I hope you're all listening to Billy Idol, dancing with myself, or whatever you're doing to yourself. You're going to feel like doing some shit to yourself today, folks, after this program. We're going to talk about all the news in the wrestling world, including Vince McMahon helping to decide when to reopen the U.S. economy the same week as he has shut down all of his economies. Plus a variety of miscellaneous malcontentery with witty repartee and ribald stories. And to join me in this, he's an essential business, ladies and gentlemen, Hawaiian Brian's house of gloves, masks, and body condoms. So safe you can fuck a porcupine and you'll be the only prick there. Your friend and mine, the great Brian Last.
Aloha, Jim, and what a pleasure it is to be here for another quarantined edition.
I couldn't hardly get that out.
I was wondering where you were going when you paused after Hawaiian Brian. This could be a number of things.
The old saying, if she's had as many stuck out of her as she's had stuck in her, she'd look like a porcupine. But ladies and gentlemen, we are here again, slappy. I'm about to have a breakdown of my own. And, you know, and here's another thing. I'm starting to be affected by this whole thing because of the paper towel shortage. But normally, I have between 24 and 36 rolls of paper towels in my outside garage pantry at any given time because I use a roll of paper towels a day. Anytime I cook anything or fix anything in the kitchen, I spread paper towels all out over the counter to go under the various plates and things that I prepare to make sure I don't spill anything on the counter. And then I just wad it up and throw it away. Or I use 2 or 3 of them when I wash my hands. Or I use 2 or 3 of them as a napkin. Or I use them to clean the counter or clean different things. Just willy-nilly, the use of paper towels, something you think in a modern society you're going to have an endless supply of. And suddenly paper towels are worth, it's like the tulips from Holland in the 1500s. They're the most valuable things on the planet. I got 9 rolls of paper towels out in the garage now, and I'm freaking out.
And you can get one for yourself by going to Cornette's Collectibles at Jim.
No, stop it. No, we're going to talk about that later. No, we're not going to talk about it. We're going to discourage talking about it. But anyway, but it just, you know, the shortages and the quarantine, the whole pandemic, it's affecting us all. It's affecting us all. And finally, to me, a shortage of paper towels. I knew somehow it was going to happen.
That's the one aisle that's still cleaned out. Every time I go to the supermarket, the meats are all back. You can get pretty much anything except tissues, toilet paper, or paper towels.
Well, I've got a lot of toilet paper. I still have, because I don't use as much. I don't shit as often as I do these other things. And it doesn't require as much paper. My ass may be big, but it's not that big. So I'll trade you. I'll ship you some shit paper. And you ship me down some paper towels.
No, I'm good.
You don't want my toilet paper?
I do not want your toilet paper. And it sounds like you're using an excessive amount of paper towels, if I may say.
Well, I didn't ask for your opinion on my paper towel use. Did I now? I was merely commenting on a current situation. I wasn't asking you to bless it or condemn it.
You said you go through a roll a day.
Give or take.
That's a lot.
Is that excessive?
That seems like a lot.
Well, that's what you say.
What brand do you buy?
I don't know what brand they are because they're unwrapped and placed in the closet once I see them. Stace takes care of the Costco situation, but it's a giant package. But they're the creative size where you don't have to pull off an entire roll. You can pull off an entire sheet. They're perforated for half a sheets.
Wait,
but then I can use 1.5.
When you store them, you take them out of the packaging?
Well, if it's a big a plastic package around the individually wrapped rolls, yeah, because that way you have to tear in the thing to get the individually wrapped rolls and then unwrap them. It takes a step out of the equation if you put the individually wrapped rolls in the closet stacked neatly so that you can just pull them down willy-nilly anytime you wish.
Okay, but they're individually wrapped.
They're individually wrapped. Okay. No, it's not like, I'm not contaminating the entire pack. What's the matter with you?
That's what it sounded like based on what you were saying.
Have you never operated paper towels before? You don't know how this shit works? There's a big outer wrapping when you buy those massive, humongous, like 24 roll packages. And you take that off, and then also you can arrange them to fit your closet better that way.
Okay.
I don't know why I have to just learn you everything. Getting a little frustrated with you, Brian. You got to keep up. Anyway, no, but at the top of the program, we got bad news right before we were going to do the show. And of course, that, it's always seems like that way when you plan to start off with a bang and then something happens. But we want to make mention of this. Howard Finkel passed away this morning as we're recording this. He was 69. And probably the most popular, most universally liked WWF employee of the last 40 years. I don't know if anybody ever, got mad at Howard Finkel or had anything bad to say about him. They'd kid him and rib him. But, I'm verklempt now, which was Howard's favorite word, right? That's how I learned it, verklempt. I always had bumfuzzled because I was from the South, but verklempt is a Northeastern word for befuddlement. But Fink was the most dedicated employee they ever had. And that's what sometimes they didn't treat him that way. I know people say, well, you rib people in wrestling if you like them. I think they went too far sometimes with, stripping him on TV down to his underwear or whatever. But he was always cheerful. He was the first one to get there to the office in the morning. He'd do what we called the Finkel report, where every morning back in those days, when there was really no internet to speak of, and there was a lot of hotlines and then of course the newsletters, Fink would get there the first thing in the morning and he'd listen to all the hotlines or he'd go through all the newsletters. And then when websites started becoming a thing, he'd go through all of those and he would type up. And my God, he must have been able to type like the wind. I don't know. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. I was never at Titan Tower at 7 o'clock in the morning, but he'd type these long Finkel reports summarizing anything that he thought Vince or the creative staff or the talent relations office ought to be aware of. And it was to the point where he was so reliable that if we were like a writing day when me and Bruce were at Vince's house and it would be 9:30, 9:45, and the Finkel report wouldn't have come out yet, Vince would actually say, have you seen the Finkel report, pal? But, and it was almost never late. So that's why it was a concern, because he'd have it by the time everybody got to the office at 9 o'clock or even Vince at 8 or 8:30 or whatever, he would have that thing ready. But he was always happy and cheerful. If bad shit happened, Fink could look at you with that beaming face and those big cheeks, and he'd smile. He's, well, Jimmy, what are you going to do? We must press on. Just nothing got him cranky. I never saw him mad at anybody. And he would get frazzled when he was rushed and hurried and etc., but never, upset. I rode with him a couple times to the Garden because he knew I hated to go downtown New York and I hated that trip into the Garden and blah, blah, blah. But he'd been going so often. What did he start in as the ring announcer at MSG? 1977, something like that. So he knew everywhere. So he could get you right in where you could hop out the car, and because nobody's going to fuck with Finkel. Normally, if you were a babyface or a heel and they saw you in a car, they'd beat on it. You had to park in the lot across the street, and $20 back then, 25 years ago, and pay the guy an extra $20 not to block you in so you could get out early. And then you'd have to walk through the people. Well, Fink could pull in and let you out, or pull up to the side door and let you in and go a different way or whatever. He knew his way around. And getting out, he could actually stop you at a store that you could get some snacks without getting shot or stabbed or whatever. But, so anyway, and he took pride in the fact that he was the longest running employee there.
He was the first employee of Titan
Sports.
Sports.
He was the first one, and he was there until, I guess, I don't know what the arrangement has been the past few years, whether he retired or whatever. I'd known and hadn't said, but I'd heard from some people that he'd had ill health the past couple of years, and Lawler had said one time on his show it was a stroke that he had. He didn't have a stroke. I heard what it was, some condition that affected his communication and some of his, I guess, movement or whatever. I don't go into details because I don't know him, so I don't want to say. But the point is, he had been in ill health for the past few years and people hadn't seen him a lot. But I think it was WrestleMania 2017 when I was down there for the Hall of Fame deal that I last saw him, and cheerful as ever. You could tell he was physically, he looked like he'd gained some weight but lost some oomph to him, but still cheerful. But great ring announcer. I don't know how they talked Vince McMahon into replacing Howard Finkel on the big shows with the female ring announcer syndrome when he did. But
were you there when they took him off TV?
I think he was still doing some, as I recall, some form of television ring announcing, but I think he'd been moved off of Raw by the time that I left and came back to Louisville. But I mean, he was still doing some stuff, so I don't remember exactly what the situation, but it wasn't long. It's the same thing as TV news. They don't want people who are good at their job. They want people that look good at their job and younger people, but anyway, it was like retiring fucking Jimmy Lennon, for God's sake. Why would you do that?
He was the best. I mean, there was no one better. And even today, when you look at all the different ring announcers, it always stands out when anyone's remotely good. Because you're in the shadow of Howard Finkel.
Remotely mediocre or acceptable.
Because you're in the shadow of Howard Finkel, who was still great, and they took him off TV because he wasn't young, and he wasn't cosmetically pleasing to Kevin Dunn and Vince McMahon at that time, but let's face it. I would say this to Howard if he was here because I love him. Howard wasn't cosmetically pleasing to anybody. No, he was the ring announcer, and he was the best.
Yeah, I know.
He was the very best.
And he had the expression, and you could tell he loved being there, right? And, just the whole energy that he had for the thing. But anyway, yeah, Finkel was special, and he was always trying to help or do something or whatever, anything that he could pitch in and do. And as I said, and a great trivia expert, not just the Outthink the Fink stuff he'd do on the website or whenever at appearances or stuff, but he had music trivia and all kinds of things. He always had that voice, I can't do it, or I'd sound like Howard and I don't, but the enthusiasm and the full voice and everything. He's fucking great. I loved Finkel. Once again, as I said, never a cross word with him or anybody else, that he associated with. He was the fucking best.
Whenever I see WrestleMania 3, and that's one of my favorite events of all time, one of those ones I can watch over and over and over again because of the spectacle of it, and I still remember how I felt as a kid seeing it. I always, when I see the opening of the show, which is Vince in the ring to introduce Aretha Franklin, and Vince wanted to come out and do the big introduction, and Howard Finkel behind it, but I always think, here's Vince, his biggest achievement, in front of what is purported by Vince McMahon to be 93,173 people, is by far his biggest achievement as a promoter at that time. And there's Howard Finkel behind him, his first ever employee, the first guy who worked for Titan Sports. Before they bought the WWF from Vince Sr. and the partners in 1980, they incorporated Titan Sports, and Vince was doing a lot of his own things. That's when Howard Finkel started working for him in 1980. And then, of course, in 1982, that's when he finds a way to buy the rest of the WWF using WWF money. An interesting accounting trick, but I always look at that scene and I'm like, well, there's Vince McMahon, his biggest moment, and there's his first employee right behind him in the ring.
And I'm sure that being a 40-year or whatever employee of the WWE cost Howard all that hair that he lost. But I think he loved it. Yeah, there's nothing he would have rather done than what he did. Anyway, we obviously, send our condolences, his family, his fans, and everything else. But, geez, the Fink. And
he was a nice, you know what? I could say, you always remember who's nice to you when you're a kid. And when I was sitting ringside at the Nassau Coliseum, I would get front row seats. And, when you're a regular there, you start talking to Howard Finkel. You're a kid, and he's the ring announcer, and he's accessible. He was so accessible. He was always incredibly nice. He would answer questions. He would pose for photos. And I was a kid asking a lot of questions, and he was always very, very nice.
Yeah. No, I can't imagine that of you. But no, I've seen him do the same thing you're talking about with tons of fans everywhere, whether it be the airport or the building or parking lot or Denny's. He's so engaged in the conversation, and he's just happy that, that everybody's watching and et cetera. So yeah, he never blew anybody off. Anyway, we will press on with the rest of the program because I want to get this out of the way at the top of the show. If you are over the next week thinking of becoming a customer of Cornette's Collectibles and sending me money, for the love of God, please don't do it. Please, I'm begging you. Brian, I opened my big fat mouth again. I thought you were supposed to be the one to censor me when I go too far and say things and do things that's going to get me in trouble.
I didn't think this was the thing that was going to do it, but...
You didn't think this was going to finally be the straw that broke the camel's... All right.
For those who are wondering why there's no AEW review this week, it's your fault, people.
Well, here's the thing. I have a website. I'm not going to name it. If you don't know what it is, please don't look it up. And I sell things there. I'm not going to talk about any of them. And I'm not going to encourage any of you to buy them. But I just mentioned on the drive-through this past week of something we were going to sell on that website I ain't mentioning. And since the drive-through came out, we've had a minimum of 200 individual orders every 24 hours. That's for the last 4 days. And I'm going out of my mind because I don't want to sell stuff I don't have, but I can't keep track of what's being sold quickly enough to actually fill many of these orders because they're coming in faster than I can put them out. Figure 800 orders, Brian. If it takes me 3 minutes to pull something off a fucking shelf and sign it and put it in an envelope and put a label on it and stick it in a pile, do that math. I've reordered everything that I can possibly restock that is restockable, t-shirts and burger towels and all sorts of the stuff that is restockable. And we're safe, folks. We're not going to sell out. If you'll just, for God's sake, just stop for a minute. Just take a deep breath and stop sending me money. We're not going to sell out of anything for the next 3 days till the next drive-through comes out and I can give you a more detailed report. I can tell you that if you ordered something before, what is today? Friday, April 17th?
Yes.
If you ordered something but by Friday morning, April 10th, your shit is all in the mail. I was about 5 to 7 days behind, as I've been speaking about on the shows, because it is not like this suddenly. It's gotten busy, but now it suddenly got ridiculous. So now this weekend, I will be working on Friday, April 10th through Monday, April 13th to get out on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this coming week. And the point I'm making to you is if you've ordered, and I love you and bless all of you, I take my responsibility seriously with bringing you your quarantine entertainment. And all I'm doing from the time I get up until the time I go to bed, besides recording these programs, is working on this shit. So if you ordered, expect it to be 10 to 14 days from the time you ordered till the time I send it out. And I'm sending almost everything priority mail except the individual DVDs that go air mail anyway. Everything's air mail these days. You know what I mean? So I'm working on it. But if you wanted to take a break for the next week and just I'll order next week, that would help me out, kind customers. And for you sadistic assholes out there that want to send me more money just to send me further into fucking a spiraling case of mental insanity, then just be aware that it'll be 10 to 14 days before I ship your shit. Thank you.
And for those of you wondering why he doesn't get help, he can't. There's
well,
no
who am I,
there's no
who am I going to have come in my fucking house?
Exactly.
I mean, as Stace is sitting at, I mean, we've got, it looks like a TV sitcom downstairs. And she's been putting those unnamed things in those jewel cases that we talked about. I won't go into any more detail. And we had new covers come in and have to be put in. We're making hundreds of sets of things. And there's the restocking of the shipping supplies. So they're bringing that every day or every other day as I sort through this, and the internet work and the printouts. It's humming around here as quickly as it can hum. But anyway, yes. So just have mercy on me and withhold the money until next week, unless you're sadistic, and then I won't feel bad about taking a while to get you your stuff. And I'm pissed because you know what this weekend is, right?
Is it the Derby?
No. Is this the first Saturday in May?
No, it's not.
Then how could it be the fucking Derby?
I don't remember when that is, and the Belmont and the Preakness.
Oh, no, it's not the Belmont and the Preakness. It's the Derby. Everybody knows when the Derby is. The first Saturday in May, the Run for the Roses, the big one. Of course, it's not going to be the first Saturday in May this year. But this weekend was scheduled to be the kickoff of the Kentucky Derby Festival. And you know what that means.
I don't, actually. Wait, you jumped on me when I said the Derby as if that was ridiculous, and then you counter with, it was the kickoff to the Kentucky Derby Festival?
And you know what that means.
What does that mean? You get your
Thunder over Louisville. Thunder over Louisville, the world's largest annual fireworks display, where they get one of the big bridges that goes across the Ohio River from Kentucky to Indiana, and they close the bridge down to traffic 2 days beforehand. And they have a goddamn team of experts come in, pyrotechnicians, and they load this bridge up with enough fireworks to goddamn blow up the fucking Pacific Fleet. And all day they have an air show with the fighter pilots and the skydivers and the fucking trick plane flying people. And the air show and the outdoor thing at the riverfront draws in a day with good weather, 250,000 people live. And they stay there all day, and they stay there all night too, because I did it one time. The fucking traffic would take you 3 hours to get home out of downtown Louisville after Thunder over Louisville. But anyway, they have the air show. It's like a day-long festivity of booths with food and drink and different things, and then followed by 9:30 at night for a solid half an hour to the accompaniment of different music with different themes for the year. They blow off these fucking fireworks, and you can see it miles away. I mean, this is big time fireworks. And they have the cruise boats or the Belle of Louisville that you can go on the dinner cruise, and they park out in the water and you can watch the fireworks, or you can be with the fucking marks on shore, or you can get the $1,000 riverfront facing rooms at the Galt House and goddamn watch out the window. It's a big fucking wing ding. And the live telecast of this gets a 50 fucking rating. I used to get the Saturday ratings for, OVW, right? For all the stations in the market. And Thunder over Louisville, the only thing that beats it every year is the Derby. A 50 rating and a fucking 70 share to watch the fucking fireworks. It's the biggest I like it better than the Derby. This year, you know what we're going to get? A fucking TV rerun of Thunder from 2016, the last real good weather day. We get Bupkis. We get Bupkis for new content. They're not doing empty arena fireworks this year, folks. We can cancel the biggest thing in the history of fucking Louisville, Kentucky. But yet, Vince McMahon can't cancel his goddamn TV show. Anyway, I'm pissed about that we don't get a Thunder this year. Wouldn't you get pissed if you missed your Thunder?
I guess.
You sound completely unfucking impressed by this whole goddamn thing.
You know, fireworks are nice. They used to do them on the beach in Long Beach.
Oh, for God's sake.
The Mets had a fireworks night every year. That was sometimes nice.
You've never seen any goddamn
4th of July
fireworks
over the
like
East River.
this. Oh, over the East River. 4th of July over the East River. They even had, was it accompanied by a live television countdown where you could actually go into the control room with the cameras and they have the 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 and the lights are firing and everything and they push the button and the whole goddamn bridge explodes for half an hour in a colorful fashion? Did they have that over the East fucking River?
They had TV coverage, but in New York, I don't even think they wanted to joke about the idea of the bridges blowing up from fireworks.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Too close to home.
Well, anyway, I guess we're going to have to go on our memories this year of Thunder over Louisville because we don't get one. But you know what will help you out with your memories, Brian Last? Especially when you get so old and senile you don't remember what your favorite pet dog looked like?
I'm afraid to ask. No, what will help me with my memories?
Skylight Frames. Skylight Frames. It's a new friend of the program here on The Experience. And actually, before they even came aboard, as they say, Stace had gotten one of these for her mother. And I didn't even realize it because I wasn't at her mother's house because she's in California. But the Skylight Frame, and you probably know more about how it works than I do, but you can email pictures to this frame so you can like send them. You know, we're all quarantined. You can't be there for Mother's Day or you can't be there for fucking a birthday or whatever the case may be. Hey, your mother's fucking birthday, pal. If you can't be there for a loved one's momentous occasion or you just want them to know that you're thinking about them, then you send them this frame and you can email pictures to it that will pop up on their frame. And they've actually got a thing where if they like the picture that you sent them, then they can fucking punch something or touch something and they can thank you for it. And you can communicate this way. But Stace has already done my Skylight Frame with pictures of Harley Quinn. And then you can, it's not just one, you can like have a bunch of them on there and you can, what do they do? Swipe? Rotate or whatever the kids call it these days, the slideshow type of thing.
Yeah.
That's what they call them. I guess they swipe on another kind of website. But anyway, these things are great. 10-inch screen. They look nice. And plus they sit there and it, you know, with that glowing picture, you know, rotating around or whatever the fuck, it adds to the value of your home even. 100% satisfaction guaranteed, and we can save you some money. You can get $10 off one of these Skylight Frames if you go to Skylight, Skylight, skylightframe.com, and enter the code JCE, $10 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame, skylightframe.com, enter code JCE, because these things are slicker than whale shit in an ice flow.
They're very cool. You know, we got one here in the house, and it's become very popular. Everyone stops in front of it to see the photos. You get a private link. That's what's cool. It's a private email link you could send your photos to, and then you can arrange them however you want. And it's become so popular here, I've actually gotten a couple that I ordered for my father so that I can now just send him photos of his grandkids, and he can put it in the house and not have to do any work because he won't do any of the work for it. He can just set it up, and I'll email the photos, and they'll pop up on there. It's a really cool item in the house, and it's a really cool gift item. And I have to say, it's become very popular here in Last Manor.
And apparently this is something that pretty much everybody but me would know how to work, right?
You know, I think it's simple enough that you could work it if you actually applied yourself to it.
Well, I got other things going on right now.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the problem. Anyway, but thank you, Skylight Frames, for the frame and the $10 off for the Cult of Cornette members. And if that's where you want to spend your money this week, folks, I'll understand. I really will. But we have the oddest promotional announcements and commercials or plugs or spots or whatever you want to call them, where half the time we're encouraging people, please don't send any money to me. It's like I'm the opposite of a television evangelist. Please don't send me any money or God will call me home. We want to thank everybody for the feedback on the interview last week with Kevin Sullivan. Where a lot of people, the comments either on YouTube or on Twitter, where a lot of people thought that it was not only refreshing, but, needed to hear Kevin's story and the way he viewed things from his perspective on the whole situation. And most people enjoyed it. Some people you'll never smarten up. Still, there's somebody on the internet, it has to be the same person that thinks everybody is a satanic Freemason. From me to Vince McMahon to fucking Kevin Sullivan. Have you got those emails?
I saw someone the other day accuse you of being a Freemason. It was the first time I had ever seen that before. Yeah.
If I was a Freemason, I wouldn't have to hire the stonemasons to do my shit, right? That's where they came from. Anyway, yeah, there's it must be one guy with 74 different names that think everybody is a satanic Freemason. And so is me, Kevin. Vince McMahon is also a reptile creature or something, but
Illuminati.
Yeah. But anyway, regardless, a lot of nice comments on the interview with Kevin, and he's the one that's been in a bad situation, because if he says anything good about himself or positive about himself, people think, well, he's trying to defend himself. But if he says anything negative about anybody else in the equation, they're all gone. And then it's something that then he's abusing the victims or whatever. That's why he hasn't told a lot of this story until it kind of had to be explained in some ways.
I think Kevin is actually, as someone who knows Kevin, I think he's shown remarkable restraint in what he has and hasn't said over the last decade. And he's in a bad situation, because how do you defend yourself if defending yourself means saying some things that may not be complimentary about someone who is revered and not here to defend themselves nowadays?
Yeah, and in some cases, not even about defending yourself, but it's about giving somebody a clearer picture of the events that happened that only people involved in those events would know. And there's everybody has faults, but you don't want to bring up anything untoward from somebody that's, or about somebody that's been viewed as a victim or whatever the case. But anyway, it was very enlightening for some people, and I'm glad we got the chance to do that. And I got to admit, I have not seen. Obviously, I haven't watched any television, and we're not going to talk about any bad empty arena matches this week. At least I didn't have to see anybody disappear, appear, or teleport. But I haven't gotten a chance to see the Dark Side of the Ring episode this week on Snuka, who there's a whole lot of evidence of what went on there. But I've heard that people were mixed on it. I did see the After Dark show, which, oh my God. Oh, poor Chris Githard is this fucking guy. It's like, hey, Jim, you once planted a fucking tomato plant. So would you host this show on gardening? And the one thing that and the reason I saw the After Dark is because it's obvious visually the worst television show ever in history. Because it's just talking Skype heads, which some of that's necessary these days. But I could put that on and listen to it while I was applying myself to other shit. Whereas I actually want to watch the visuals on the regular program. But Irv Muchnick, who knows more about this than anybody on Earth because of the extensive writing he's done on it and the research that he's done, was on the After Dark show for 20 seconds to say, well, no, there is, with the evidence that we've uncovered, absolutely no doubt that Jimmy Snuka was involved in this. And that was the last thing, the only thing he said. And then the show was over. They spent 15 minutes with fucking Greg Valentine saying, yeah, I think she slipped in the shower and I always had a good time working with Jimmy. But and Knobs, and I mean, Knobs was a fan at the time of the incident. And Greg wasn't there. And of course, there's almost nobody alive that's spooky in itself. That was actually there besides Vince and, a couple people that probably, Vince, I guess, it wouldn't speak. But why did they, I just couldn't believe they spent 25 minutes telling old stories about Jimmy Snuka and then brought the one guy on that actually knew this case of anybody that was on the show, and they gave him 30 fucking seconds.
And apparently, and I think it's important to note, and we could discuss this however much you want, but I'm one of the people that wasn't, to put it nicely, I wasn't blown away by the Dark Side Jimmy Snuka episode. However, it's important to note that Dark Side After Dark, or whatever that show is, really, it's a different show. It's not like a continuation of Dark Side of the Ring.
No, it's Vice produces the After Dark show to, it's like Walking Dead and Talking Dead. You don't tune into Talking Dead to see an episode of The Walking Dead, and I don't even know if it's done by the same people. But no, Vice is doing this talk show with old Chris Gethard as the host. And once again, what did he put on his resume to host a wrestling talk discussion program?
And, apparently, because I was very interested in this episode because it's a story that I have followed somewhat closely. Like you said, Irv Mushnick knows more about this than anyone. And he was on this case before anyone. When did he first report on this? In like 92? I mean, he's been on this for a long time. Yeah. Because, this story just went away after a while, which is really pathetic and sad. And then Irv was really the first person to bring it back. And then it took so many years until the local paper in Allentown realized they were sitting on this story and then decided to go after it. And they did a good job once they did that, but it was really Irv. Irv Mushnick is the guy who has made sure this story got out there. And apparently he recorded a lot more for that After Dark show. And it's not live. I think a lot of people think it's live. It's live to tape.
Yeah, no, you can tell there's certain things that are edited in certain places they edit because it's not live. No.
Well, Irv apparently had a lot more to say about the issues with the actual Dark Side episode.
Ooh.
And they just edited him because we have to hear Brian Knobs and his thoughts on the Jimmy Snuka murder. And make no mistake, Jimmy Snuka murdered Nancy Argentina. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It happens.
Well, okay. Well, wait a minute. Well, back up. Was Irv not on the Dark Side of the Ring episode? Because I was under the impression that they had talked to him.
He was. I don't think he was utilized. We don't know what was on the cutting room floor, but let's just say if I was making a documentary, even if it had to be somewhat compact to fit whatever, 44 minutes, 46 minutes, whatever it was, I probably would have used Irv a little bit more and a little less of other things.
Other things.
But I think, again, I don't want to just
tiptoe through the window.
Here's the thing. I think.
They're friends of ours, but you're obviously you were let down by the revelations in the episode.
Well, here's the thing. I look at it. I think they're very nice guys, and I think they're obviously wrestling fans. But you have to look at it as more infotainment than straight documentary.
Are you saying that they left the question up in the air as to whether Snuka, and I'm not, nobody is claiming that this was a premeditated Columbo-style fucking murder, but Snuka, obviously, with the evidence that's been uncovered by Irv Mushnick and a few other people, mostly Irv, but with the conflicting statements at the time, with the shadiness of the whole situation, there's no doubt that he killed her or contributed to her demise in some fashion. Are you saying that the documentary left it up in the air as if that's still a question?
No, that's the one thing I think that the program did, was make sure people understood Jimmy Snuka did this. I think there's a lot of facts around the case that were left out. I don't know how you leave out the fact that he beat the living shit out of his wife months after that, to the point where she ran beaten to the house of Buddy Rogers and his wife.
I was about to say she ran to Buddy Rogers' house, and was he home or was it just his wife was home?
I don't remember if Buddy was home off the top of my head, but that's a major story that everyone knows about, and I don't know how you leave that out if you're painting.
But that's what led to Rogers. That's when that was his last comeback in the WWF, right? And
yeah.
He had ended up being the manager of Snuka. Snuka was a big baby face, and they had switched Rogers' baby face, and he said, I don't want to manage him anymore. I don't want to deal. They were neighbors in fucking Jersey, right? I don't want to work with this guy anymore. And then where was the timing? I don't mean to get off on a tangent here, but where was the timing where he tried to sue him because he slipped and took a bump in catering or something?
That was a few months after this. He decided he didn't want to ride with Snuka anymore. And then I think it was at the Garden, actually. He slipped backstage.
That's right. Do you think Rogers was back to his old tricks and looking for a way because he didn't want to be doing that anymore, so he was looking for a payoff on the way out?
I don't know, but it is funny that when they got on the outs with Bruno and Bruno sued them, that's when they bring Buddy back. And then when Buddy sues, that's when all of a sudden Bruno shows up.
Yeah.
It is funny how that worked out. But I think...
anyway, but yes, the incident with his wife, she ran to the Rogers family for help. That was not covered.
I think there's a lot of things that are left out and a lot of timeline issues with how the shows are put together that sometimes present a false narrative or a historically inaccurate chain of events that happened.
I see that, and we've talked about this before. I've talked to you about this, that I can understand in some cases having edited television or edited stuff in general, that sometimes to try to tell the overall story, you can't necessarily be chronologically precise, but there's also going too far and leaving out things or putting things in the wrong order that creates a mistaken conception of it.
And sometimes you can be precise because there's enough story there that if you know it and you know what you're watching, you can have a precise story in a compact period of time that makes sense and is coherent, as opposed to kind of bouncing around with different things. The big thing that came out of this show that a lot of people are talking about is, and Don Morocco was on the show, and of course, famously, Morocco and Fuji were in that hotel when everything happened, and they were there when the cops were there, and then later on they were in the hospital because that's the same night Eddie Gilbert got into his car accident.
Oh my God, was that the same night? I didn't even realize that.
Same night. So I mean, Morocco, Eddie Gilbert talked about it. Eddie Gilbert got brought to the hospital, and Don Morocco was already there because of what was going on with Snuka. And
Eddie probably said, well, nice of you to meet me here.
But that was the same night. I mean, it's a pretty notorious night in WWF history. But the new story that they had here that had never been reported before is Sam Fat 2, better known as the Tonga Kid, or fans of the movie Body Slam, Tonga Tom. He says he was riding in the car with Jimmy Snuka and Nancy to Allentown on that day. Now, that story has never been told before.
Well, but wait a minute now. Tonga, that was 1980, what?
83, May of 83.
Tonga Kid didn't start till after the Hogan era began and the expansion in 84, did he?
He did start a few weeks before that working some shows, not yet as the Tonga Kid.
Oh, okay.
He would start using the Tonga Kid gimmick, I think, late in the year, and then once they had the problems with Snuka in 84, which included him going to rehab, which was the year before the incident in Israel where they found him or in the Middle East, where they found him with drugs taped all over his body, and Vince had to pay to get him out of that. But when Snuka got sent to rehab
it was hash, right? He had hash taped around his chest.
But when Snuka went to rehab in 84, that's when they slid the Tonga Kid into the Piper feud. And it worked, and he got over big time, and he flamed out in that role fairly quickly. I mean, he was 19 years old. He would later come back, of course, and be one of the Islanders, and then later on the Samoan Savage for the SST and the NWA. But he says now, and no one has ever heard this story before, that he was in the car with them driving down. There's no way to verify that story. I'm not saying he's lying. I'm not saying it's true. Yeah. But they used that to approach the chief of police, who is shady as fuck. I mean, this guy, you look at this guy and you don't believe anything he says, and he seems like the worst kind of corrupt cop you would ever want to deal with. Without ever knowing him or anything, you watch him on here, and he comes across awful. And they say, well, we now have a guy we just talked to who said he was in the car. And then it's kind of left at that. And I felt like that was something you needed to dive deeper into. You can't just leave it with that. And this has been an issue I had with some of the other episodes where they kind of just surface level approach something and then just back away. But, you know, the other interesting story I've never heard anyone follow up on is Tony Atlas, in his book that he did with Scott Teal on Crowbar Press.
Yeah.
He says that he ended up marrying a girl in the book. I don't know if her real name was the name used in the book. Her name was Lisa. And the way she's presented in the book, she was, to put it nicely, a female fan of the wrestlers who a lot of the wrestlers knew.
She was an arena rat.
A groupie, let's say.
Okay.
And Tony ended up marrying her around this period of time. And in the book, Tony says that she was partying in the room with Nancy and Jimmy when the fight happened. And I've never heard anyone follow up on that with Tony Atlas or look for this Lisa and see what she knows. But I'm sure you understand what I'm saying when I say this.
Yeah.
From my time around wrestling, any of the female groupies, we'll use that word, they usually know the other groupies. And they usually know the gossip, and they usually know what's going on in the territory, and they usually have a unique perspective. If you're a young kid and you end up knowing some of these groupies, you get gossip and news and dirt that no one else knows, and usually it's all true. You can verify it and back it up because you find out later on things.
That's probably the one source that Uncle Dave never bothered to cultivate.
You know, Dave has actually said that when he was a young kid going to the Cow Palace, I think those were the first people he started talking to were the arena rats at the Cow Palace, and that kind of got him inside a little bit. But I've never heard this followed up on. Tony Atlas has claimed that his ex-wife was in the room partying with Nancy and Jimmy when the fight happened. And now that's the kind of detail, again, who knows what is true, what isn't true, but you have to look into that. I think if you didn't know the story inside and out, if you're not someone like you or me who has followed it, or Irv Mushnick who knows it better than anyone else, at least coming out of that, you get the impression that Jimmy Snuka was a major wrestling star who was also a pretty shitty human being who murdered Nancy Argentina.
So we ended up in the same place. We just didn't tell all the stories of how we got there.
I look at it as a missed opportunity. And if Irv Mushnick's listening, please just write a thorough book about the whole thing. This is one of those topics that deserves a book.
He's got a book. What is his website? Concussion.net? Is that it?
I think so. It's concussion dot something. I don't know what.
Concussion
exactly.
Maybe you can find out by the time I finish blathering this and we'll correct it. But he's written copious pages on this, as they say on his website, that
I think that there needs to be just a coherent book from beginning to end. Because, I mean, the other thing is, tell me if you heard this, and I was waiting to see if this was brought up, but didn't Nancy date Hulk Hogan when he was in the territory?
I've never met the lady, so I've heard in the past that she was involved with somebody else. But, well, I mean, obviously, but I mean, somebody specific, a major name, but I can't remember for sure whether it was him or not.
I believe I had heard that she was dating Hulk Hogan when he had his first run in the WWF. But again, there's so much to this story, from it happening and everything around the people involved to Irv's research and being really shut down by what appears to be a corrupt police department, to the story being revisited 30 years later, to the lawsuit. I mean, they brought up that Jimmy lost a $500,000 judgment to the family for wrongful death, I think it was.
Yes. They
didn't bring up the fact that he went back to work for Vince after that. He never paid them a cent, but it wasn't like he disappeared off the face of the earth. He was back on TV in 1989. He was working for the AWA and other places in between, but he was back working for Vince in 1989.
Well, wasn't that basically... He was gone while the case and the lawsuit and et cetera was going on. He worked for Vern and whoever else. And then when the lawsuit was settled and he lost, and he came back to work for Vince, but he never paid him. But I think they probably they would have continued to use him, except they didn't, while the procedure was going on, they didn't want him on the cards, and especially, in the Northeast.
I think it's one of those stories that it's tough to do it in a very short period of time because there's a lot of different things you have to address, and there's different people you have to talk to. They had Morocco on, but it was more really to talk about the Morocco-Snuka feud, which at one point they erroneously put as 1980 on the screen.
Oh, how dare they?
But Morocco was there in the hotel the night everything happened, and he was in the hospital when Eddie Gilbert got there. So, I mean, there's lots of little things I think needed to be included in this. But I think if you didn't know anything about the case, at least coming out of it, you have an idea of what Jimmy Snuka did. But I think if you're someone who knows the details of everything, you didn't, other than the Sam Fatou claiming to be in the car, which they didn't really expand upon as much as a claim like that out of nowhere all these years later, after he had never said that to anyone. They didn't expand upon that the way you would need to. But I don't know. I saw it as a missed opportunity.
Well, one thing I know is that Irv Muchnick being on for 20 seconds on After Dark after I sat through the rest of the program, that chapped my ass. That was a pain in my keister. And you know what you can do about pains in your ass, Brian Last? You can freeze them with the Omax cryofreeze. See, how was that? That was a nice little segue there. No, we've talked, but folks, this shit is tremendous. And we've been talking about it. And now more than ever, you don't want to go to the doctor's office. You don't want to go to a chiropractor. You don't want to go to a massage parlor. Even if you would get a happy ending, it may turn out to be unhappy 2 or 3 weeks down the road. But you've got hips or backs or knees or shoulders or anything else that hurts. We've talked about how great Omax cryofreeze is. The roll-on or the sport cream. What do they call the cream? Goddamn. I can't even remember now. But it's so good. It's the joint cream is
CBD.
No. I'm talking about the cream. It's not it's like a sport cream or a
recovery cream.
Recovery cream. There's where I was going with that. I like the recovery cream even better than the roll-on. But regardless of what manner you pick to deliver this stuff into yourself, it works. You can just roll it right on. It's not like the stinky, icy hot. It's not like the greasy shit or the Vicks Vapor Rub or whatever. This stuff, it has menthol, it has CBD, it doesn't have THC, but don't hold that against it. And it will almost instantly make your aching joints or your bad hip or whatever the case may be feel better. And to me, the cream actually, it goes on so nice and it kind of whiffs you up a little bit too. And it does even better than the roll-on. But regardless, my mother-in-law with the hip and knee replacement loves it. Your whole family loves it. Stace and I love it. And I got a lot of various aches, stiffness, and pain. Everything on me is stiff except what I'd like it to be. But anyway, if you'd like to get your stiff stuff limp,
what? No,
go to omaxhealth.com. That's OMAX Health, HEALTH.com, and enter code JCE and get 20% off Omax cryofreeze and anything on the site. And we've read emails from artists down in Georgia. We just had one on the drive-through here, I think, last week. He had torn his Achilles tendon, and it never healed properly because he had to go back to work too quick or whatever, and it was really nagging him. And then his son was born, and he's like, shit, I can't play with my son. And he had heard these spots, and so he got some of the Omax cryofreeze and tried it out. And it instantly helped, and it made him more mobile, agile, and hostile. And he plays with his son, and I think they even got a dog. What in the world is next? A cat, and then possibly even rabbits. But he really likes it. It worked for him. It's worked for us. It'll work for you too. Omax cryofreeze, omaxhealth.com, and you can save 20% with the code JCE. What more can we do to keep people from having to go out in public?
I don't know. What more
I
can
asked
we
you a
do?
question. I don't know. Was that rhetorical? I don't know. What more can we do to keep? We can go to your homes and fucking stand outside your door and threaten to cough on you if you leave the house. I wanted to bring something up this week because real quick, people have been on my ass because I've knocked Hikaru Shida. I know this is not a major topic, but it brings up actually a very interesting booking philosophy that's no longer adhered to because nobody understands it. They say, oh, Cornette, you might not like Riho or, whatever the girl's name. The girl that looked like Margaret Cho and dressed like Freddie Mercury. What was her name?
Emi Sakura.
Emi Sakura, who they put over. Oh, she trained all these girls with the Japanese Outlaw Girls promotion from the time they were 9 or whatever. Like, that was a big deal. Anyway, the point is they presented these girls first, and then here comes Hikaru Shida. And people are saying, well, but Hikaru Shida is a real wrestler, and she doesn't act like a Japanese schoolgirl and blah, blah, blah. And I've dismissed her. And the reason why I dismissed her is because when I started watching the program and the promotion, I saw Riho and I saw Margaret Cho with a mustache and a mic stand. And so instantly, anytime that I would see a girl wrestler from Japan, I would think in that vein. Do you know, have you ever heard the reason, Brian, why that Jody Hamilton and Tom Renesto, the Masked Assassins, one of the hottest heel tag teams of the 1960s, they worked in main events everywhere they went. They were main events in Georgia, in Florida, in the Carolinas, the Midwest, wherever the Assassins went, they were a huge tag team, right? And obviously Jody was still remembered as a wrestling legend when he was training in WCW in the 90s, etc. But do you know the only place that they never worked as the Assassins was in the Carolinas for Jim Crockett Sr. when they went in as the Bolos? Do you know why they went in as the Bolos?
Oh, I forget.
Well, I will remind you. This is what Jody told me. There had been outlaw assassins in the Carolinas. There had been a team there, either it was for an outlaw promotion or it was just a team of masked assassins that whoever Crockett's booker was a few years beforehand had used just as underneath talent. Anyway, he said they poisoned the name. So we had to change our name because we had not been there. They had. They saw assassins as job guys, not as top guys. So they changed their name and they became main event stars anyway because they were top talent and drew all kinds of money. But that brings up something interesting that nobody pays any attention to. If you're trying to establish your promotion, whether you're starting on television or even if you're not on television, but you're establishing your independent promotion or whatever, you don't put gimmicks on people or present underneath talent in the same way as you might present a top guy that you might be able to get later on. Remember when Shark Boy was doing Steve Austin in TNA? We'd oh shell, yeah, but oh hell yeah, and he'd wear the vest, and he'd do the head shake and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Okay, imagine if the people in TNA, before they had ever seen Stone Cold Steve Austin, had seen Shark Boy doing that. If he was just doing it, if he was just doing the head shake and the walk and wearing the vest, oh shell, yeah. And he's an underneath guy. He's a preliminary. I'm not knocking Shark Boy, but it's an underneath preliminary fucking gimmick that they were treating as a rib. Imagine then if Stone Cold Steve Austin came in doing all that shit after they'd seen Shark Boy do it, it wouldn't have got over. Because the people would say, oh, he's copying a fucking preliminary guy. For the same reason that you can't replace a top guy, a main event talent in a territory or a company with somebody that's in any way similar. Imagine this. Watts tried with JYD. Tried every black guy in the business. Some that had drawn money and were very talented, and some that hadn't and couldn't. But none of them did because it was too similar. It was an obvious replacement. Jerry Jarrett tried to replace the fabulous ones with new fabulous ones. And even when he had Jaggy Fargo cut a promo and say, oh, yeah, I like these guys too, it didn't work. Because it was seen as a copy. It was second rate. The reverse works as well. If a guy has used a particular gimmick or a look or something of catchphrase, pattern of speech, whatever the fuck it may be. And he was underneath or preliminary or middle card guy or whatever. He won and he lost and wasn't nothing to write home about. And then suddenly a guy comes in that you're trying to push as a main event guy, but he looks the same or does similar to or kind of confusingly the same as or whatever. It doesn't matter whether the guy's a main event fucking guy or not. If he does that shit, he's not going to get over because he's being seen as copying what the fuck that some other guy we didn't give a fuck about was doing. The main event guy can still get over if he's a main event guy and he's talented. He just has to change his shit and not do any of the shit that guy was doing, which is putting the cart before the horse. You got to make the fucking underneath guys change and not do shit that the main event guys do. I mean, does this make any sense? And nobody thinks about this. It's like they just bring in a bunch of fucking people at one time, all with similar characteristics or attributes or whatever, and just put them all over the place and expect anybody to fucking prosper under that situation.
Well, a couple things. I think there are enough differences between Hikaru Shida and Riho. I've said it to you before on the show. They're not all Japanese schoolgirls. Riho is clearly a Japanese schoolgirl.
Well, yes, but that's what I'm saying. No, in hindsight, no, I was too rough on Hikaru Shida, is what I'm saying. That's the point I'm making. She's not a schoolgirl. She looks like she's pretty much grown adult girl wrestler size. I mean, and she wears tights and doesn't fucking act goofy, but I've tuned. The point I'm saying is a lot of people who don't give a fuck and live and die by this and don't just desperately want to like a promotion, but just might give it a chance if they see something they like, they ain't going to take the time. They've poisoned the look with fucking if you have a bunch of 7-foot guys, you got no giants. If you have a bunch of Japanese girls, then none of them are going to stand out because you presented the first ones as fucking silly. Is what I'm saying. Yeah,
I understand that. I mean, I think there are enough good Japanese female wrestlers in the States right now who would fit into All Japan Women, in the early 90s. Asuka, Kairi Sane, Io Shirai, Hikaru Shida. But to your earlier point, I think maybe, off the top of my head, as I'm thinking about this after you raised the question, I think maybe Jody Hamilton might have been off with what he told you because...
Okay, now we're going back to Jody.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Tom Renesto work in the Carolinas as the Great Bolo? Before he teamed up with Jody Hamilton?
I believe he did, yes. But that doesn't mean that once they became the Assassins that they wouldn't have gone somewhere as the Assassins unless... there was a reason to change the name, and then Renesto said, well, I used to be the Bolos, so both could be true.
Because did they return to the Carolinas after that initial run as the Bolos? Where, again, I think it was, he wasn't the original Great Bolo. There was another guy. And then Tom Renesto took the gimmick, and then he started teaming up with Jody Hamilton, who became the Junior Bolo. And then when they left the Carolinas, they became
Junior Bolo.
When they left the Carolinas, they became the Assassins, but did they ever return there before? I mean, you think of the Andersons when you think of the Carolinas. You don't really think of the Assassins having a run throughout the 70s. I mean, Renesto retired pretty early.
Oh, no. They never went back in the 70s. No, this was the 60s. They were in the Carolinas before the Andersons.
Right.
Yeah.
I think they became the Bolos because Renesto was already working as the Great Bolo.
Well, and maybe Jody was senile. I don't know, but the point still fucking that has happened a number of times in the wrestling business, and it's like, once again, is Nick Goulas, who his Night of Champions, where he would just decide that I need something to dress a card up or fucking goose the house, so every match is going to be a title match, and he'd have 6 matches. The fucking deal was there wasn't 6 titles in the territory, so he had a drawer full of belts, and suddenly the only time that year in Louisville the NWA United States 6-man tag team championship would be defended, or a fucking girls championship, the ladies U.S. junior title or whatever the fuck, or the American tag team some off-brand title that you never heard of before, unless he would pull it out for the Night of Champions. And after a couple of times, people said, fuck it, and it became harder to get legitimate titles over when you introduced them into the territory for real and we're going to be regular with them. every time you do something that takes the shine off something that you want to do seriously in the future, because you've just done it as kind of half-ass or whatever, it diminishes that particular thing or that talent or that et cetera, et cetera.
So are you saying
the point is still true?
Are you saying you're going to give Hikaru Shida another chance?
Well, I never called for the, end of her career and for her to be paraded through the town square on a fucking meat hook. I just said that I, wasn't really particularly interested because I was seeing so fucking much of it. That was when old Freddie Mercury was on TV all the time, and JR had to fucking giggle and pass over it when she came out dressed as fucking Freddie Mercury during his goddamn Live Aid stage or whatever. But I will
watch
late
career Freddie Mercury.
It was late career Freddie Mercury. It wasn't even fucking fluffy haired Freddie Mercury. So the point is, when I have more time, I'd be happy to watch Hikaru Shida if she wrestles somebody that I give a shit about. But anyway, that's the point, is that when you just do shit, that's what Battle Royals used to be one of the biggest drawing matches in wrestling until they started doing a goddamn Battle Royal and a Battle Royal on a spot show and a Battle Royal just because, well, we want to add something to the card and everybody can work twice. We don't have to pay them again. And then people, in some territories would see a Battle Royal every fucking 6 weeks, and then it was nothing, or cage match or whatever. Now it's Hell in a Cell. So they made the Elimination Chamber. Now it's so fucking science fiction. You got to top this. Just goddamn slow down, decide who your fucking top people need to be. Make sure that they're all different from each other, and don't let anybody else be in any way similar to them. Fuck. Anyway, we have the answer to a burning question that was raised, I think, on the program either last week or on the drive-thru. I can't remember. When did I say I guarantee?
That was on the drive-thru.
Okay, well, suddenly over the last few days, the most important thing on Twitter and everywhere else has been to let us know that was noted Cajun chef Justin Wilson, this old Cajun that used to do that cooking show. They would say, it's going to be good, I guarantee. But we have had more feedback on, apparently he had a huge fan club, because we've had more feedback on that on Twitter than when we talk about fucking wrestlers. You've gotten these tweets about with the Justin Wilson clips and etc.
I was hoping for more Galloping Gourmet fans. I don't know what happened.
Well, it's because we mentioned his name, but we couldn't remember Justin Wilson's. That's why everybody had to tip us off about that. But I would enjoy a good Galloping Gourmet clip. He was so witty and urbane, etc. But then somebody said, no wonder you couldn't get the fucking accent, because he's not fucking English. He was Irish.
Scottish.
So Scottish. Yeah. Well, now I've pissed off an entire country.
That's what I heard.
He was Scottish or Irish or something. I don't know what the fuck he was. But he was very, very witty and urbane. He had to look. He looked like Roger Moore in The Saint. How's that for a way back reference?
That's pretty good.
Anyway, so Justin Wilson, if you were on the scorecard as the Cajun chef. And, you mentioned also a few shows ago the movie Monster Squad, right? Well, I want you to know I've not watched Monster Squad, but I want you to know that a lot of people were tweeting about the Wolfman having nards. This became a thing again because of our program.
Wolfman's got nards. That's right.
Wolfman's got nards. Well, I have now figured out a way that we can shave the fucking Wolfman and not nick his nards. No, seriously, we can shave the Wolfman down and not nick his nards, because the last thing we want to be is a bunch of goddamn nard nickers. Now, somebody's going to play that clip, and
maybe the Wolfman could shave his own nards.
No. Well, the Wolfman's perfectly, well, I was about to say he's perfectly capable of shaving his own nards, but can a Wolfman, does he get hands or paws? He has the opposable thumb, I guess. But anyway, if you don't want to be nick your nards and be a nasty nard nicker, Well, I'll guarantee you what you can do, because now the quarantine edition of the Perfect Package is available from Manscaped. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. If you're bored in the house, you don't need to play with your balls. We're not encouraging just idle masturbation, but we are encouraging cleanliness and healthiness of the balls. And here's another thing. If you go outside and you touch something, and before you clean your hands with Purell, or if you can find any, or you wash your hands or whatever, you reach in your pants to scratch and you touch your balls, now you've given your nards the coronavirus. And the coronavirus is noted for lodging itself in wet, damp, hairy places. So we need to keep balls smooth and shaved to protect in the economic recovery, and the folks at Manscaped can help this. So, if you buy a package from Manscaped, you are actually helping to stop the spread of the pandemic, and you're keeping your crotch smelling nice. The Perfect Package 3.0 comes with the new improved Lawnmower 3.0. We've talked about it. It's not only impossible to nick yourself or your nards, but it's also got the LED light so you can see exactly where you're going. You can do this even in the dark. Cutting-edge ceramic blade. No way to commit ball hairy-carry with this thing. Also, in the Perfect Package, the Manscaped Crop Preserver, which is an anti-chafing ball deodorant and moisturizer. Also, you get the lawnmower, the big heavy-duty job for the most hirsute amongst us. And if you subscribe to the Perfect Package, you get a new replacement blade refill for the lawnmower delivered to your door every 3 months. And for a limited time, if you subscribe to the Perfect Package 3.0 kit, you are also going to get 2 free gifts: the Shed Travel Bag, which is the $39 value, and the patented high-performance anti-chafing Manscaped Boxer Briefs. And these things are slicker than cum on a gold tooth, boy. They feel good. So, you know what to do. Manscaped.com, 20% off and free shipping, plus all these free gifts with the code Cornette, CORNETTE, at manscaped.com. Make shaving your balls and grooming your crotch the best part of your day, because it usually is mine. Of course, I have some shitty days, but nevertheless, ball hygiene should be uppermost in our minds when we're talking about cleaning of the various parts of our bodies. Okay. Don't you agree?
Sure. Don't be like the Wolfman, folks. Clean those nards.
Sure. What the fuck? You act like you're somewhat embarrassed at my mentioning of the necessity for the grooming of the crotch and the taint and things.
Well, you do go pretty deep. Well, I probably shouldn't put it that way, but...
Well, you want to be so suggestive. Anyway. We talked about, on a recent program also, we talked about the meaning of swerve or swerved. That has changed recently, because now everybody thinks, because of shit stain, that it's some sudden illogical turn of events that makes no sense and surprises you, when in actuality a swerve was always the confidence scheme that you were, when you swerved someone, you were manipulating their thinking to get something out of them. And actually, I did it off the top of my head, but I wanted to go to, and I'm not trying to sell this, by the way, my graphic novel Behind the Curtain. Don't order it if you don't have it for the next week. You should already have it. But there's a glossary of pro wrestling terms in it, and how that a lot of them these days, the meaning has changed because the guys themselves, the wrestlers, don't know where those words came from or how they were first applied or what they first meant. And then some fans have heard wrestling terms, but they misuse them. And I just wanted to read, because what I put in here for swerve, wait a minute, okay, there we go. There's the S's. Swerve, I said, originally A swerve was a con game. If you swerved someone, you were lying to them or manipulating their actions in order to profit or otherwise gain a benefit at their expense, all while making them think you were doing them a favor. In modern wrestling, it is somehow morphed into a combination of a surprise turn and a bait-and-switch tactic, i.e., the fans thought Austin was going to help Triple H, but he swerved them at the last minute and hit Triple H with a lawnmower. So I understand the fans not being able to use the terms properly because it's from a business that they're on the outside of and they're reading about. And sometimes the people that write these things that they read on the internet are outside the business as well. So they don't really know either. But now a lot of these days, the fucking wrestlers, they either don't use terms at all and don't know what they mean if you use them. So they look at you like you got turds hanging out of your mouth. Or they misuse terms themselves because they've learned them not from wrestling, but by reading the fucking shit on the internet that people who aren't in wrestling write. And it's been happening that way for about probably 15 or 20 years, but especially this past decade. A lot of times I'll go in the locker room and not understand what guys are saying, and I'll say something to them, and they'll, like I said, stare at me like I'm fucking a Martian with three heads. You know everything, obviously, but how many people do you think, they've surprised me with this, how many people do you think don't know what ballyhoo was, including people who would read it on the Raw format every week when that was the first line on the Raw format back in the 90s was Pyro Ballyhoo, item 1.
Right. See, that's what I was about to say is I think people know the word. I don't know if they know the proper use of it from the Raw formats. That's exactly where I was going to go was Pyro and Ballyhoo.
Well, and then, fans have heard that and they think that some of them thought it was pyro or the billboard of the show that the announcers do, which kind of is what they were describing there. But ballyhoo came from the bally in the carnivals at the athletic shows, or I'll read you from my book, Bally/Ballyhoo. In the carnivals, the bally was the platform or area outside the tents where the pitch man or stick man would entice the mark into the show. The ballyhoo was his spiel or pitch. More broadly, any type of hyperbole is called ballyhoo. And it was actually not only just a wrestling term, but it was a term used by a lot of sports writers in the 30s, 40s, 50s. The ballyhoo over the boxing scene or the ballyhoo over the football rules changes or whatever. But, now it's become like next pyro ballyhoo, like that's one fucking phrase. I'll look for a couple of more here. See if you think that anybody knows what these are these days. Encourage me somehow.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead and do it. Everybody knows when you bury somebody, you make somebody look bad or weak or incapable of success, diminish their drawing power or stature to the fans or the boys or whatever. You bury somebody.
I think that one is known, yes.
What about business match?
No, I doubt any young wrestlers are using that in the locker room.
A business match was from the early days of pro wrestling when two of the top guys would agree it's not going to be a full shoot. We're going to work the finish. It's sort of like a friendly shoot where we're going to agree to not beat the other, but we're still going to mostly shoot. It's a business match. It's kind of an offshoot of a friendly shoot. But it was an agreement, and the promoter didn't even have to be in on it because in those days, the guys in the ring the top guys controlled what was going on. The promoters just promoted the fucking match. Everybody figured in.
That one, I don't know if people, you use it a lot. I don't know if people all know that one.
Because that's a thing and I'll say, as a matter of fact, at Ring of Honor one time, one of the referees was going to go make a McDonald's run. And I said, figure me in. And he's like, what? You want to go with us? I said, no, just if you were figured in the old days, and it became a broader expression that the wrestlers would use. But if you were figured in, it meant you were a main event guy. You were a guy that was integral to the roster and the booking plans. The booker had you figured into everything. It was good. You were one of the top guys. And then it became, broader. Hey, we're going to have a McDonald's run. Figure me in. I'll take a Big Mac, whatever. You're figured into whatever is going on in the situation. But now it's simple, but, guys will fucking stare at you. We've mentioned before the gorilla position was called the gorilla position because of Gorilla Monsoon, and there really was no name for the position besides the curtain before that. Everybody knows now that hooker in wrestling is not the same thing as a hooker in other society. You had workers, and then you had shooters, and then the hookers trumped the shooters. Hey, Rube. Nobody says that anymore.
No one uses the term Rube anymore.
Well, but it became obviously nobody screams, hey, Rube, when there's a fight. Okay, here's the thing. Hey, Rube, according to the book, a brawl, riot, or out of control fight. In the carnivals, if a carny got into a fight with a mark or townie, the other carnies would yell, hey, Rube, to signal the rest to come help their brother. And obviously nobody's yelling, hey, Rube, at a riot anymore, but it became a phrase that you would use even when there wasn't a fight. Oh, yeah, Jesus Christ. He and fucking Brian got in a big hey, Rube over who was going to get the front seat. Or I pulled up to the building and there was a big hey, Rube going on in the fucking parking lot. And nobody does that anymore. The Rock killed Jabroni.
Yeah. That's now transcended wrestling.
Yeah, that's a mainstream word now.
You watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You ever see that episode? I think it's the one where Mac gets to shoot the puck at the hockey game. One of my favorite episodes. And he keeps calling Charlie a jabroni. He's like, hold on. This word jabroni, it is so cool. Where did it come from?
And he thought it was Zamboni or whatever the fuck. And it... Anyway, a couple more. Milk It. Nobody understands Milk It anymore. How can they not understand Milk It?
Well, you have a lot of lactose intolerant people in the wrestling business.
Well, Milk It, the act of teasing, delaying, or foreshadowing something to get maximum reaction for it. More broadly, if you constantly talk to somebody about something but never follow through on it, you're said to be milking them. As in, you've been milking me on this steak dinner for fucking ages. But when you'll say, now milk it, they'll go, what? Now milk it. Milk it. Don't just punch him in the face. Show the people you're going to punch him in the face. Let him sell back from the fear of you punching him in the face. Get him ready for the punch in the face and then punch him in the face. Nobody knows policemen anymore.
Because there aren't any.
Well, they don't have to be. Remember the famous wrestling magazine cover line, Terry Funk says, I'm not my brother's policeman.
Yeah.
In the early days when you had to be worried about double crosses because they were happening and happened on a number of instances, the world champion had a policeman. And the policeman would be a dangerous shooter, a legitimate fucking wrestler. And if the champion was a gate attraction but not a real wrestler, then the champion would have a high-profile match with the policeman in a worked match, and he'd win. Then when a wrestler that was outside the trust of the promoters and the wrestlers in the group were making challenges to the world champion, then the champion could say, fine, as soon as you beat so-and-so, then I'll give you a title match. Because I've already beat him. If you can't beat him, what makes you think you can beat me? That way it protected the champion in the eyes of the fans and the people from looking like that he was ducking anybody, but at the same time it kept him out of the ring against non-friendly challengers that would double-cross him and fucking hook him and take the belt. The policeman kept order. This is such cool stuff. They don't have any cool shit anymore. Anyway, I will go. This was one. They didn't say this in England, and when Adrian Street came to Tennessee, he didn't get it. Take a powder, which literally means make a hurried exit from somewhere, such as the ring. Right? Take a powder, disappear, vanish. Well, Dundee sent the fucking finish over to me and Adrian and Linda in Nashville one time, written on a piece of paper. And so that, because the locker rooms were separate. And that's where I learned to give finishes, because I was the only one who could read Dundee's writing. So I'm giving them the finish. I've been in the business 3 months, but I'm giving Adrian and Linda the finish. I said, and then you guys take a powder. And he's what, like a fucking headache powder? What? I'm like, no. And I also found out there's a different meaning to fanny in England. When Dundee told fucking Miss Linda that the referee Thomas Marlin was going to bend her over his knee and spank her fanny one time, you should have seen the look on her face. Apparently in England, fanny is a little bit further to the front. Anyway, Ed, you didn't know this?
No, just hearing you say it is fun.
What I was told at the time. And lastly, who shot John? Nobody says who shot John anymore.
Nobody. Mark David Chapman.
No, for heaven's sake, nobody actually got shot. Who shot John is nonsense, bullshit, or hogwash meant to con, confuse, or deceive somebody. As in, used in a sentence, don't give me that fucking who shot John about the mailman losing it. Where's my check? Right? It's blather. Bunch of who shot John. Don't buy that book that glossary is in. I think I did a pretty good job of talking him out of it just now.
What book?
Of buying the book. What book? Exactly. For fuck's sake. And here's one more thing that just grinds my gears. When I see people on Twitter or on the internet talking about, well, the way the match was booked, the booker booked this match for Brian to give Jim a belly-to-belly overhead fucking flying pancake or whatever. And they think that because now all this shit is so choreographed and pre-planned and scripted out and worked on by a producer and et cetera, that it was always this way, that these matches were so tightly controlled. And when do you think, what was it? Once again, was it the late 90s? Was it the rise of the network television modern era when it started to be that way, you think?
Maybe a little bit after that, but yeah.
But the booker, I don't know what the writers don't ever write the match. The writers write, like Shitstain in TNA. The only time he would come in the truck to be the producer of a segment is when it was talking. Even if there was a physical angle in the interview segment, he wouldn't have anything to do with that. He would want one of us, one of the wrestling producers, to handle that and to be in the truck to relay it and handle it with the talent. And because he considered that, not only he knew that he didn't know anything about it and he was fucking whistling Stranger in Paradise, but also he considered that the fucking less important part of the program. But contrary to popular belief, when wrestlers actually called things in the ring and this shit was done more on the fly so it would look a little more spontaneous and less pre-planned, the booker would decide how the match should go in terms of what the finish was, and if there were things you needed to do during the match to tie into so the finish made sense, he would suggest those, but otherwise, the wrestlers had the fucking match. That's why you tried to hire good wrestlers, so they'd go out and have a good match. If you hired wrestlers and gave them good finishes and they went out and had shitty matches, you got different fucking wrestlers. But you didn't tell them every move to make. A finish on a spot show, something simple, the booker might say, okay, Brian's the babyface and Jim's the heel, right? Let's go with real life. So the booker would say to me, Jim, have a good match, shine him up like a brand new penny, right? and then get some heat, and then fucking big comeback and a couple of false finishes, and then catch him with your fucking, whoever's going to win, catch him with your fucking finish, or whatever the case may be, or a small package, or whatever. And the guys would go out and have a fucking match. Now, if it was Eddie Graham and it was the St. Petersburg Bayfront Center, I've had Kevin Sullivan tell me, I've had all the guys that worked Florida tell me, he would sit you down, everybody that was involved in the match, including the referee. That's why I've always done finishes this way. Everybody, including the referee that's in that ring and is around the ring or is going to run in or whatever, everybody involved sits down all together if possible. And if it's an angle for television or if it's a main event match on a big show and you go over this thing and everything means something. And Eddie Graham would give them a finish that lasted for fucking 8 or 10 minutes from the time they went into it till the time they paid it off. And there would be twists and turns. Maybe he would even call a second set of heat as part of the finish after the initial comeback. And then the babyface gets stopped again. And then there's another tag or another comeback. And then somebody, the referee is distracted for something, but it's only a 2 count and a kick out or a foot on the rope. And then you introduce somebody coming down to ringside. These complicated finishes that everybody had to be in a particular position, properly to pull it off. And everybody had to be distracted just so to pull it off, or there had to be a certain spotlight on each individual action where 2 things couldn't happen at the same time or you'd split people's attention. So it had to be bing over here on the left and then boom over on the right. And then something happens in the middle. And they were very intricate. And when the guys would go out and do it and they would fucking drive themselves crazy because they wanted to please Eddie Graham and they'd try to make sure that this was right and still looked spontaneous. But it was a natural happening, evolving of events that looked like it was happening completely accidentally as you were watching it. And then they'd come back and he'd be standing there and they'd go, "What about it, Eddie?" He'd say, "Well, it was pretty good, but you missed the 3rd drop kick." He'd catch the one thing that they missed in fucking 8 minutes or whatever. But that's why all those guys that worked Florida, it was the cream of the crop. They were so fucking talented. The main event guys, and they became bookers and they became top talents everywhere because he not only told them how to do these things, but he told them the timing and what the fans should see in what order and what spotlight should be on things. It's the same way I told guys in OVW how to execute the finishes so they made sense and looked believable, and you hooked people, but you didn't leave them. But as far as calling a match, that once again was up to the wrestlers, and most of it, I've seen guys who were able to talk. And all they would do is mention a couple of spots. You'd 2 or 3 spots. Hey, how about we'll do this like we did in fucking El Paso or whatever. Bing, bing, bing. Or let's do a spot here. Or I've got a new thing that I'm doing, so I'll take this bump or whatever the fuck. A couple minutes. And then you'd go out and call it in the fucking ring, depending on how the people were fucking buying things. So I think that's why now that the matches, the matches that the guys at a high level have, they're so flawless, they're not real. Because nobody makes a mistake or even looks like a little herky, or you had to snatch something or something was a struggle to get. It's so fluid, it looks like a performance rather than a conflict. And I think pre-planning shit has damaged the matches in that regard. What do you think? I don't know.
Yeah. I think that there's too much pre-planning of everything nowadays in wrestling. I guess if the crowd is silent, you can't listen to the crowd and base your match on that. But everything at this point is pre-planned in the back.
Well, yeah, in the empty arena, it'd be hard to listen to the crowd. But like when Ernie Ladd was a booker, right? Let's say Ernie Ladd's the booker, and he's given a finish to Magnum TA and Crusher Darso. Fat Darso. You wouldn't get any specifics on what you were supposed to do. You would get the story of your match, and then it would be up to you to go out and have that match to fulfill that story. Ding, 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 the bell rings. Darso, I need you to shine your baby face up like a brand new penny. Put a cape on the man 'cause he's Superman. When it looks like he's going to hit the finish line on you, you cheat like the criminal you are, and you get some heat on him. Waltz him across Texas. Make him sell like he's going to the electric chair. He's going to be crying for his mother. You go for the coup de grace, but Maggie moves, and now the worm is turned. Magnum blows his comeback. The natives are going wild. He hits the belly to belly, but at the count of 2, you get a leg on the ropes. And Magnum gets up 'cause he thinks he's won, but the referee gonna tell him you grab that belt from the table and you clock Magnum with it for the DQ right in front of God and everybody. And get some heat on him after the bell till the cavalry makes the save, but you take a powder before they can get to you. That's what the booker would tell you. And from that, fucking guys went out there and did and had their matches. That's why they all look different, because there's different people having them. It wasn't the same people setting them all up.
Another great Ernie Ladd. You've never done that one before.
Well, it just, that's the old, what's the word I'm searching for? The stereotype of Ernie is like, yeah, make him sell like he's going to the electric chair. He's going to be crying for his...
Put a cape on him, he's Superman? Is that what you said?
Put a cape on the man because he's Superman. It's just... He would say that, but you get the picture in your head that way of how the match is going, rather than if he said, now, when you grab him in a headlock and throw him off into the ropes, he'll take and shoulder tackle you. No, you want to paint a picture for the guys to go out and do their fucking thing. Anyway, this is the kind of wrestling knowledge that you will get on Patreon when we get the time to record more stuff for Patreon.
That's right, although a lot of people have already signed up, I have to say.
Well, yeah, because we do have a bunch of stuff up there they haven't heard. Cornette's College of Wrestling Knowledge is open on Patreon, and we have got buku episodes now, multiple episodes, not countless hours. I guess somebody could count them if they had enough time, but it would take you a long time to count the hours of shows, the experiences and drive-thrus we have up already on the basic tier, the initial tier. It's $5 a month. So it's pennies per hour of entertainment. Not only the shows, all of them are going to eventually be up there, and in order, so you can follow along and you don't have to jump into the middle of the series, but also cursing compilations and a watch along to the first 5-star match that we've already accomplished. And it's all that on the basic tier, $5. And more is going to be added on a regular basis, but we're also going to try to record some new programming as soon as either one of us has time to fucking breathe.
New shows go up every Sunday night. I think, I got to go back through my notes here, but I think this weekend we have the Honky Tonk Man episodes, which are very popular from the past. Those go up this Sunday night.
Because Honky don't give a shit either. He will tell people what he thinks.
Great guest.
Yes, he's an outspoken. Yeah, somebody said Jim Cornette on email or somewhere this past week. And by the way, if you've emailed me and I haven't answered, there's a reason for that, because I haven't fucking seen it, because I haven't read a lot of these. But said, what are Honky Tonk Man Wayne Ferris's 3 main contributions to pro wrestling? And I wrote shake, rattle, and roll. I thought that was quite humorous.
That's humorous. Do you think it's true?
Well, Wayne will tell you that he got the most out of doing the least of anybody in the history of the wrestling business. With that hair slicked back and the pink Cadillac, that saved him taking a lot of fucking bumps. He took the non-flippy shit completely the other way, where he would have matches where he didn't fall down till the finish, but it still got over.
I saw him work for Dennis, and he came in, and the fans there aren't smart fans, and they seem perfectly fine with this. He came in to his theme song, got in the ring, sang his theme song over the track, had a short match where he really didn't do anything, and I think he was even the babyface on this show, won the match, got back on the mic, sang his song again, and then left. So you heard the song 3 times, twice with him singing it.
And everybody was happy. in Haddonfield, New Jersey, or wherever the fuck it was.
Yardville.
I remember Yardville. Anyway.
Vineland.
Oh, God, I'd rather forget Vineland.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Yeah. But anyway, speaking of pissing people off, because we always are, me and Jerry Lawler both trended on Twitter last week for another stupid fucking reason. Did you even pay any attention to this?
I paid a little bit of attention to it after the fact, yeah.
All right, well, Lawler trended. I got up one morning, and as I was printing off orders, I looked at Twitter, and he was trending, and I was freaking out because I thought, oh, shit, I hope he didn't have another heart attack. And then I clicked on it, I saw what it was. Jerry Lawler has beat me. This was even fucking worse than mine, more innocuous. Jerry Lawler trended on Twitter because when Tozawa on Raw gave somebody, he flipped off the apron and hit the guy with a senton, and Lawler called it, well, there's a ramen noodle moonsault. And people were jumping up and down mad about that. And once I saw that, I said, all right, I tweeted it. I said, this is why wrestling sucks now. And we don't deserve good wrestling because of you fucking pussies. If you possibly can get mad about this is why we can't have good wrestling, because of you fucking pussies that whine and cry about everything that everybody says. How ridiculous does it have to be? At what point are these people going to realize that they get jumping up and down fucking mad over stupid shit that nobody else is paying any attention to? And it causes people to trend. And then I trended on Twitter. I just tweeted that and went about my day and came back like 5 hours later and I had 5,000 fucking responses. And most of them were saying the same thing I said. What the fuck is the matter with people? And the other ones, well, it's no surprise a racist defending a racist, and you despicable, vile racists, and this disgustingness, and how can this be said in public? What the fuck is the matter with these fucking people at this point? Do they just they're sitting at home and they got nothing else to look at? It wasn't a funny joke taken on its own, because it wasn't even a joke taken on its own. And of course, some people say, well, it wasn't a moonsault, it was a senton. Well, thank you for clarifying that. But somebody finally, with the power of cognitive thought, said that they believed that he was saying that because he was making fun of the announcers because every move now has a lucha name. The Tope con Hilo and the fucking Hurricane Rana and whatever. So he was making fun of the other announcers calling all these fucking Mexican moves, and the Japanese guy gets the ramen noodle moonsault. But then, isn't ramen noodles a Chinese dish? Stacy likes ramen noodles. It looked to me like it was more of a Chinese thing. But regardless, look at what we're talking about now. People were calling for Jerry Lawler to be pulled off of television, and he's a despicable human being because he said the guy gave the other guy a ramen noodle moonsault. And when I tell all you fucking whiny little bitch pussies that if you're jumping up and down mad about this, that you have never left the house and gone out in public, even when you could do those things back in the old days, the before time. What the fuck? No one that with all the shit that's going on in the world today. And people can actually spend time on that. If you were offended by my tweet saying that you were a fucking lunatic, if you were offended by his statement, you've got two choices. You can drop dead or blow me. Because it's ridiculous. And so many people are saying, my God, these supposed wrestling fans that revere Bobby Heenan and Jesse Ventura and whoever the fuck else, if they'd ever actually seen them and heard them work, they would have pulled them off of fucking television. Can you imagine Bobby Heenan's anything or Jesse Ventura's Tito Santana material? Ay, ay, ay. You know what? Here's something I've made note of also on Twitter. In 1970, in Birmingham, Alabama, the interns and Ken Ramey, in a program with Lynn Rossi and Bearcat Brown, who were, by the way, the first integrated tag team, babyface tag team in the South, The interns painted Bearcat Brown white on television in Birmingham, Alabama. And they sold out 6 weeks in a row, 6,000 plus people. Bearcat Brown never made so much money in his life. It cemented him as he was a main event guy in this territory. He was already a main event guy, but now he was a legend after that until he retired from that point on. If this was today and they did that, they would have pulled the TV off the air, demanded that the company shut down, and poor Bearcat would have been unemployed and broke.
Well, you can't really compare something from that long ago to now. Society's completely different.
But I'm just saying, when
they tried to do that in the AWA with Colonel DeBeers and Derek Dukes, and you know,
yeah, but the talent was suspect, and nobody was watching the fucking show anyway. But no, what I'm saying is that race relations have come on so far and so long that before, the black guy willingly worked in the fucking deal and made a ton of money, more than he ever had in his life. And 50 years later, if they did the same thing, the black guy would be unemployed. He'd make nothing. So the white people would be the ones complaining about the television program. So one way or another, the black guy gets the wrong end of the stick. Anyway. Or you can drop dead or below me. I'll bet you, I will bet you, Brian Last, that you, I don't know, I don't have a transition. I bet you, I figured you'd take it from there. MyBookie, you were supposed to be MyBookie the last time we did this bit, and I got bupkis for this either. Sports have come to a screeching halt. Basketball benched, pitchers off the mound, football players sticking their hands up somebody else's ass besides the fucking sinners. Because now there's no sports. But what do you want to do? What can you do if you want to bet on sports or on anything and it's all shut down? You can go online and you can stay sane and stay entertained. You can play blackjack. You can play roulette. You can pay slots. You can bet. You can gamble. You can play esports. You can do all this at MyBookie. If you know how to do this shit, MyBookie is the place to do it. Remember, we had the problem because I don't know how to bet on sports. Neither do you. You were supposed to find out and tell me, and it didn't make any sense to either one of us.
That's right. I was going to bet, I think, $100 on the NFL.
We were going to make millions.
Millions.
We got nothing.
Nothing.
Nada. Caca. Well, don't let this happen to you, folks, because if you know how to bet on shit, if you haven't led the sheltered life that Brian and I have when we graduated from Mrs. Finster's finishing school for fine young boys, MyBookie has partnered with some of the leading esports brands. You can bet on virtual action straight from the court, NBA 2K20. You can use the promo code, by the way, JCE at mybookie.ag. Is that correct? Mybookie.ag?
That is correct.
It certainly is. And use the promo code JCE and get 150% bonus on your first casino deposit. Now, I ain't no mathematical genius, but that sounds like a big deal to me. Promo code JCE, 150% cash bonus on your first deposit, and you can claim those extra funds all the way up to $750. You spin, you win, and you get paid at MyBookie. Video poker, blackjack, roulette, the Vegas casino games, the esports, the whole 9 yards. Stuff that people with time on their hands can take advantage of, unlike me. MyBookie. Sounds like a Robin Williams fucking bit. Start with the premise, hats, and then do the line, and then hats. MyBookie.
.ag.
.ag. All right, what do we got here elsewise? What are you doing, by the way, with all your free time, this week on your programs?
Another packed week of programs on the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. A few notes. Of course, you could get information about all the shows on Twitter at Superpodcasts or on Facebook, facebook.com/Arcadian Vanguard. This week, on Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdrin and Barry, AWA historian George Shire joins the show at bowdrinpod.com. This week on John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight, then and now, as we talked about this week on the drive-thru. February 4th, 1990, the original broadcast is reviewed. We play clips and then talk about what was really happening. We played clips on the drive-thru of Steve Beverly seemingly knowing exactly how Sting was going to be turned on at Clash of the Champions 10, and find out more from Steve Beverly.
And even knew what was going to happen after Sting got hurt, which we didn't even know yet.
It's pretty interesting stuff, and we go into detail on that. It's a big period of time in wrestling. WWF trying to get Mike Tyson on board. The Clash of the Champions happens. Sting versus Flair still on the agenda for Wrestle War. Hear that today. PWSpod.com. Available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Also, quick mention, the Super Studcast for patrons of the Studcast at patreon.com/Studcast. The Tennessee Stud Ron Fuller welcomes Jacques Rougeau, or Jerry Roberts to some, to the program. Hear more at patreon.com/Studcast. And wait a minute now, because when he went down south to Georgia, they probably said, who the fuck down here is going to be able to pronounce Jacques Rougeau? So they made him Jerry Roberts. Well, it's close enough to Jacques Cousteau.
I don't think a lot of people in Georgia were watching Jacques Cousteau back in those days.
Well, of course, the 605 Super Podcast, the Mothership! Yeehaw!
God damn it. I thought I had you blocked with that when I jumped in.
You can't block the Mothership. It is the most powerful force in the universe, and rumor is the Mothership will be touching down very, very soon. We should have a new episode up, hopefully within a few days.
The rumor is. It's on the radar. It's like Santa Claus on Christmas Eve on the local news. Santa's on the radar. He's entered North American airspace.
Get ready for the new episode. Jeff Otto on the Great American Bash 1985 on videotape. Ringmasters. Find out the inside story on what happened there, as well as his involvement with the NWA coming to Philadelphia. We have Al Getz, Scott Teal, and Greg Oliver on the Rocky Johnson biography and what exactly happened there, as well as Hawaii audio from the 1960s, some really cool stuff, and much, much more. The 605 Super Podcast, 605pod.com. Go through the archives today and available wherever you find your favorite podcast. But stay tuned, it is very close to touching down. The Mothership!
Yeehaw! All right, there's been stuff going on this past week. Even though I haven't watched any bad, empty arena wrestling with no fans, there's still stuff going on in the world of wrestling. But I've put a couple of things together, Brian. Follow this logic train with me for just a second. The Florida governor is a well-known Trump fuck who didn't want to shut the state down to begin with, but he has recently declared the WWE an essential business so they can do TV in Florida somewhere around the same time that Linda McMahon gave the governor of Florida $18 million from her right-wing crackpot political action committee that she runs. And Donald Trump then announces that Vince McMahon will be on the council to decide who reopens the fucking country, while Linda was the small business administration secretary for Donald Trump in the administration. So basically, I connect the dots and come up with, well, wouldn't you know who won the pony? Is that what you come up with?
I think that's what everyone's coming up with, yeah.
Vince won the pony. The same week that he shuts the XFL down and announces bankruptcy of that, he fucking fires the wrestlers, cuts employees. Imagine if he still had the $300 million from the XFL that he's lost. He could probably keep his wrestlers for the next 10 years or so. But this is one of the guys that's going to be advising us on when to reopen the fucking economy? What the fuck? Did I ever tell you the story of Vince and Trump and the plane?
No, I don't think so.
I was not there for this, but I heard this from a source not named Pritchard that was on, remember when, well, you don't remember because you weren't there, but you remember reading about when they first went in the 2000s. They went public, they had all the money, and they started flying around a charter plane. And because when I was with Vince, me and Vince, JR, and Bruce, we flew commercial with everybody else. Vince was in first class and I was in coach, but nevertheless, we were still on the same plane and it was commercial. But then they got their own plane. You remember this time period?
Yeah.
So a person who was on the plane told me this story. And as I said, since they were not named Bruce, I feel it's a valid story. When you fly a private plane, even like the little ones that the little one that Crockett had was a Gulfstream, a converted, commuter jet, prop jet. And it was customized inside and everything, and he got it to fly the wrestlers around. But even if you have a big corporate jet or a Lear jet or whatever, you fly into a specific part of the airport. It's not just – that's why when you go to see your Aunt Lola off at the airport, you don't have a little private jet next to the fucking Delta plane. The commercial travel gets their gates and their terminals, and – the big airports, they have different facilities for private planes, whether they're the little ones or even the big corporate jets. So Vince's jet is sitting there, and they're delayed for some reason. And the person that told me stories on the plane, there's some other people on the plane, but there's a bunch of people standing off the plane. Also, they don't get the jetways. They have to go up the steps. Depending how big your fucking plane is how big the steps are. That's where you see Trump walking up those big steps to Air Force One with toilet paper on his fucking shoe. He doesn't get a jetway because it's not Delta. So there's a bunch of people standing around Vince's big WWE plane, and they're waiting to get on, and they're fucking dicking around. And all of a sudden, they look out the window, and guess who the plane on the other side of them is? Donald Trump with a bigger fucking plane, right? And Trump, this was before he was president, obviously. Trump pulls up in a bigger fucking plane, and Vince looks over and sees him, and they actually see Trump looking out the window waving, right? And I can't remember the exact method of communication when I heard the story, but it's not like they could roll down the window and yell at each other like two teenage kids side by side in hot rods. But obviously they know each other, so Trump either called Vince or sent a fucking pilot with a message or whatever the fuck. But it was like, hey, Vince, if you don't have enough room for all those people on your plane, we got plenty of room over here. And he said fucking Vince got hot. His plane was bigger than Vince's plane. This is how both of them, I've said this a million times, Vince and Trump are so much alike. If Donald Trump was articulate and could be charming in any situation and was halfway intelligent, he'd be Vince. Because they think the same way. It's just that Trump is a complete unsavory piece of pig shit in every way, whereas Vince you can like and have a good time with, but still secretly down deep he's a businessman and he'll cut your fucking heart out. But at least Vince is, smoother about it. But they both think the same way. Not putting illnesses over, not putting a pandemic over, because it'd be bad for business, or in Trump's case, it'd be bad for my votes, whatever the fuck. But they're very similar, so this should be interesting. With now Vince and Linda McMahon are helping run the fucking country indirectly, which Trump's lost so many people. I guess, all hands on fucking deck. Let's bring the head of the and Dana White's going to be in this too. Did you see this? Was Dana White the one? No, it was Mark Cuban that said, I'm on this council. I didn't know anything about it.
There were
Trump was just blurting.
Yeah.
Trump's just blurting names out. But what the fuck? But what about what happened in the WWE? Let's stick with that. What about what happened in the WWE?
Well,
do you have a list?
Let me, before we get there, so I could try to get a version of this on YouTube, because we can't use any of that. Let me ask you.
See, that's why you have to listen to the show, folks, because YouTube's touchy when I talk about what a piece of shit our president is. But go ahead.
What do you think about WWE being declared an essential business for the state of Florida? And part of the reason was that it was so important to the local economy.
Well, it's important to the local economy if they were having WrestleMania, but how is a fucking closed set going to make a massive impact on the fucking local economy? It's bullshit. He got the money. He's got to come across with the fucking goods, and they have to make it look good. But no, the WWE is not. If the NFL is not essential, then how is the WWE essential? And if they say, well, we've got to continue to provide programming for the people that are closed up, doesn't every other program that's closed down or shut down? Isn't that why I'm watching fucking reruns of Thunder over Louisville this weekend from 4 years ago?
It seems to only be essential so Vince could keep his contracts with Fox and USA.
Yes, that seems like that's the essential part of it. It's not, I'm sure this is not going to cause a goddamn pandemic outbreak that's going to cripple the state of Florida any more than it already is. But still, it just, the golden rule, them with the gold makes the rules. If you're determined to do something, you can find somebody somewhere that will take something to let you do it. But at this point, the guys have to stay 6 feet away from each other in the locker room, but in the ring, they can sweat in each other's mouth.
Do you agree with them bringing Jerry Lawler in to the taping?
No, and I don't agree with Jerry Lawler going. But Lawler doesn't put anything over either. He doesn't put it, but he's just so blasé about everything. I've said before, if he's playing cards in the locker room, you come in and say, "King, the building's on fire." Well, guess this will be the last hand. He doesn't put anything over like that. We used to make fun of him. Jim Ross used to make fun of him. In the 90s, when he would come up to the Raw tapings, until recent years, like 5 or 6 years ago, he didn't wear a fucking coat. He'd walk in the middle of the Boston winter. He'd walk in straight off the fucking plane from the airport with a sweatshirt and a fucking pair of pants. King, where's your coat? It's too bulky. Carried around on the fucking plane. And he'd come in in flip-flops. But I know he doesn't particularly put anything over or stress about anything, but he's had a fatal heart attack, and he's 70, and he's flying around he tweeted a picture of him with a mask on and flying around, and the airport's empty. No shit. I can believe they want to bring him in. I don't know why he'd want to fucking go.
Well, before we get to the next area of what the WWE's been up to this past week, the idea that they are now, however fraudulent it was done, declared an essential business for the state of Florida and they're in operation. Do you think there's an onus on USA Network or Fox to say, don't do this? And do you think, look, the wrestlers have never, ever done anything to help themselves and to unionize or anything else. Although maybe if they actually did stick together, now would be the best time of all because you don't have a big star at the top like a Steve Austin or a Rock or a Hogan or a Cena who wouldn't do it. You have enough guys that are close enough together in terms of their placement on the card that if they wanted to, they could do something. I mean, they always could have done something, but the idea the wrestlers are now being told to come to these tapings where everyone else is being told to stay home. Everyone else is being told to stay at least 6 feet away from anyone else, or in the state of New York, if you can't avoid social distancing, whether you have to go to the supermarket or whatever it is, you are now required to wear something covering your face, your nose, and your mouth. What about the wrestlers? So the question is, what do you think about USA and Fox's responsibility here and allowing this to go on? And what do you think about the wrestlers participating in this?
I've said before, I'm an old promoter and an old show business adage, the show must go on. They were going to bring everybody to Florida, tape a bunch of shit for like weeks and weeks, and then send everybody home. And I can buy that. One trip down there, do the best you can, one trip back, and you're fucking done for however long. And then he changed his mind when they were already in Florida. Was it that close? He said, no, we're going to go live every week. Going back and forth to Florida every week from wherever you fucking live, no. If I heard that, I'd be, what the fuck? That's ridiculous. But there's still speculation. Are they afeared that the TV networks might use this as a loophole to fucking reduce or cut their deal, that they're not doing live shows because it's specified in the contract? I keep hearing that. But to what you said, if that's the case and they're going live to make sure that the networks do not have a problem with their deal or try to jack it around, then this is the perfect time for the wrestlers, because not just the guys on Raw or the guys on SmackDown or the guys in NXT, but everybody, if everybody got together, even if they did have a Hogan or an Austin that wouldn't join in, if everybody got together and said, we are going to protest, we're going to hire legal representation, there's a pandemic, people are being told to stay home, people are, if you have underlying health conditions, people in your family, whatever the fuck, and your one is to go back and forth across the country to Florida, the ones he didn't fire, we'll get to that in a minute. Fuck you, we want a union. And if they all just said, we're not doing shit until we've got a union, what would they fucking do? If everybody across all their brands and everybody on the roster together said, we're not going to fucking do this, they going to fire everybody and bring in a bunch of fucking guys from every other. So many guys now are signed to contracts for other companies, even if they're bullshit contracts in some cases. It would take forever to sort that out. It would be like the Atlanta office was the day after they figured out that Ann Gunkel had stolen all the talent. They had to call people in from every territory that was friendly to them. Now there are none. There are no territories that are friendly to the WWE except for the territories of the companies that they already really own or work with. And if all those guys together said, no, all the other guys are under contract, they got no shows, no tape shows, no live shows, no kind of shows. So, and how babyface would the wrestlers be if they blamed the pandemic for having to, or cited the pandemic and blamed the WWE's insistence on those independent contractors risking their necks to go back and forth to Florida, etc. They'd be so babyface in the fucking news, my God. They should go ahead and do something for the talent now, just recognizing that fucking threat. But they probably figure, and rightfully so, the guys will never stick together. They'll never put up a united front, and a bunch of these guys just want to be on TV so bad they'll do whatever.
And by the way, for the record, hypothetically speaking, which I tend to only do when I actually know what I'm talking about. Hypothetically speaking, if you were a wrestler in WWE and felt like this was the time to unionize, you should contract SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA. They can't solicit you, but if you determined it was time to get some help, they would certainly be open to listening and potentially helping. And another person you could probably... That's what I was going to say.
Stephen P. New not only was on the show here a while back and gave updates on guys being able or eligible for unemployment, but also had mentioned on Twitter, now this would not be happening if the guys were unionized. And it could SAG, AFTRA, somebody take some fucking pity on these guys and help them out.
If you don't want to contact SAG, AFTRA yourself, go through Stephen P. New. He may know a person or two there.
There you go. Stephen P. New knows people all over the place. But now at the same time as the guys who are left have to go back and forth to Florida for the foreseeable future, he fired a bunch of people, including, I mean, you may have the whole list there. I've seen names back and forth, and some of them, to be honest, probably weren't long for that world anyway, because they hadn't been using them. But Lance Storm, they asked Lance to come back. He closed up his wrestling school, changed his fucking life, and took this new job. And 4 months later, they're like, "What the? See you later."
Well,
what the fuck?
To be fair, and I don't think there's too much fairness from the WWE right now. I don't think they fired Lance. I think they furloughed Lance. And there's a difference between, and I'm not excusing it, but it's
okay. Well, what is the difference? What is the difference? What is furlough? A furlough is a vacation you get in the Army. That's the last I heard.
Yeah,
how does furlough different than fired?
Furlough is a vacation where you're not paid, but they intend to potentially bring you back. Fired and released from your contract is just goodbye.
Well, I don't like either one of them. If I've made plans based on what they've told me up until this past week, that's fucking ridiculous. Kurt Angle? Why? I mean, obviously he was not wrestling full time, but why would you? The whole 9 yards. A lot of the producers, a lot of the agents, but they said they're going to cut employees too. I'll be interested in finding out who comes out of this better, the wrestlers that are the meat of the whole product and that they couldn't run the company without, or the employees that are a dime a dozen, to be quite honest, in fucking Titan Tower in the marketing department or whatever. I'll be interested to see who comes out better. But Vince will cut shit from whatever he needs to cut shit from. He's proven that. Remember in 1995, they came in and took all the water coolers out of Titan Tower?
Yeah, and how close was that to when they had the meeting, which led to Lord Alfred Hayes walking out and J.J. Dillon planning his exit?
That was the same time. They cut all of the talent wrestling talent staff, like the Lord Al Hayeses and the James J. Dillons and those guys, like 60%. But yet on the other side, they kept the office employees, pretty good, but they took out the water coolers. So that's why all the fucking wrestling people were mad. And that happened like 6 months before I got up there and started my fucking office job. And I was like, boy, I heard they paid these guys so well. What the fuck? I ain't getting that much. I came in at the wrong time, as usual.
Well, there's something to be said to the point that the WWE had a roster that was too big. And that there was a number of people on the roster that they didn't necessarily need. I mean, look, there are people they signed now just to prevent from going to AEW or anywhere else. But doing these cuts right now, in the middle of the pandemic, where guys can't go out and work for an indie or Japan or anywhere else.
Well, yeah.
After WWE just bragged in a statement they issued that they have $500 million in cash reserves as well as debt that they have access to, they could borrow against. Now they decide to cut all these guys right now.
Not even 2 months from now. Not even, just, okay, we're so scared that we're $1 billion company, but Vince has lost a lot of money lately, so we can't afford you guys. We're just going to let you go in the middle of the zombie apocalypse. I mean, who else on that list? I saw, once again, as I said, some names that you wouldn't really know they were there, but others I was surprised at. Mike Chioda, the ref, he was there when I was there 25 years ago.
He was there longer than that.
Yeah, but I'm saying, he's been there that long. They let him go? What the fuck?
Here are some of the names on the list. I don't know. Some of these guys you may not even know, but some of them you certainly would. Drake Maverick, who I think was he Rockstar Spud?
Yes, he went to OVW here after I was gone from OVW, but I've met him a number of times. Yes.
Kurt Hawkins.
I've heard his name.
One of the ones that a lot of people are talking about, Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows, who I think had just signed. These are two of the guys WWE did not want to let go anywhere else, and they just signed them.
Well, yeah, wait a minute. Didn't they just make a big deal out of you guys got to stay and we're giving you new contracts and raises and blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
Well, what the fuck? If they'd have let them go so they could sign with AEW, they'd have jobs now?
Or New Japan, wherever they would have signed.
Or New Japan or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
And New Japan ain't firing anybody over this, are they?
No, New Japan, they really seem to be doing everything the right way. Everyone does, really, except for Vince and the WWE, actually.
But see, that's the kind of thing. Remember, I even though I don't give a shit whether Bischoff drops dead or turns blue, when they brought him up there and then fire him 3 months later and he had moved to Connecticut at least part-time or whatever the fuck, I'm like, motherfucker, how can you trust anybody's word? If somebody had done that to me once, if I'd have moved to Connecticut in 1996 and 6 months later they said, no, you're done, you got to go, well, I wouldn't have minded leaving, but I would have done some damage on the way out. Because that's bullshit. You broke it, you bought it. Once I tell somebody, move across the country, I'm going to give you this job, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars, unless the fucking whole company goes out of business. No, I've made a fucking commitment.
But that's one of the problems with WWE, and that's why unionization would be beneficial here, because Vince McMahon has always seen these contracts as a one-sided affair. And by the way, they're a very one-sided contract where WWE can get rid of you and cut you and do whatever they want, but you can't get out of it.
Yeah.
You can't say, you know what, I'd really like to move on with my life right now. Nope, they will find a way to screw you over and add time to it and mess with you and devalue you. But when they're ready to say, you know what, we need to move on, they just cut you like that. No thought, no care, you're gone. Here's some more names. EC3.
Okay. I've met him, good guy. I haven't seen him on any of their TVs. I don't know what they were doing with him.
Here's someone who I'm high on. I think he's a great talent, and I actually hope he goes to AEW. Lio Rush.
Oh, good Lord. We've debated back and forth on him. $1 million manager, and I can't stand him as a wrestler, right?
That's right. Although I think you came around a little bit to him as a wrestler.
Well, he can work. That's the thing. Just he's so fucking minute, and he can talk like that. He's got that fucking heat-getting personality. You can't feature him in any type of main event scenario as a wrestler, but as a manager / mouthpiece, he could be right in there.
Eric Young.
Poor Eric. I didn't know he was still there. I like Eric Young. He was in TNA. He's a hardworking guy. But, that may not be a surprise because we've watched all these shows and haven't seen him. So what were they doing with him?
Heath Slater.
I keep hearing about Heath Slater, but I never get the chance to see him.
Another guy, I'm pretty sure you don't know this guy. Aiden English.
Yeah.
Kurt Angle.
That's once again, he wasn't wrestling regularly. Did they just sign him up for a bunch of money to just hang around, or what was his deal to begin with?
He was doing stuff behind the scenes, I believe.
Well, all right. I don't,
Again, it's not about whether or not they deserve a job at this point. It's about when you decide to do this.
Well, yeah. I mean, the timing of everybody sucks, but I'm saying, how would you let Kurt Angle go? He obviously has value as a name, as a personality, as a backstage producer or whatever. I don't know.
Again, just to frame everything here, Vince just declared bankruptcy with the XFL. Then Florida declared that WWE is an essential business and can continue to operate. The main reason it would need to operate is to get the money from the television networks. It turns out Linda McMahon's super PAC, the super PAC she's running, it's not McMahon money, just to be clear, but the money that she can direct to different places on behalf of the super PAC she's running, gave the state of Florida a ton of money before this decision
$18 million.
$18.5 million.
I'm sorry.
And then they immediately cut all of this talent and say that executive salaries are going to be reduced. And I'd like to know if Vince is going to reduce the dividend he takes. That would be very interesting to know. I doubt it.
And by the way, that was the whole big recap because of all the inflammatory shit I said about certain people that you can't put on YouTube. So just so those people know that what we're talking about, you've recapped it for us. Wouldn't you know who won the pony?
We'll get back to this list in a second. The other interesting thing, I don't know if we've talked about this on the show, they decided in the last year or so that they don't want to be in Titan Tower anymore. They want to get a new office place. And I guess they were allotting $140 million into building out their new office for all the new employees they were going to be adding to the giant ship that is WWE.
Remember we talked about that last year whenever it became a big news thing. It's still in Stamford. It's down the road, but Titan Tower with the, the 4 floors and the fucking, multi-level parking garage underneath it is just not big enough. So they're going to spend all that money. And did they buy the building or no? They took a lease on the building for 20 years or whatever the fuck.
That's right. They were selling the office they're in now, and they had a lease. They didn't actually buy the new building.
But now they've fucking put that on hold because they got too big for their britches too quick, I guess.
Back to this list. Sarah Logan, who I don't know if you would really be aware of.
Not really.
Referee Mike Chioda. Eric Rowan
there
of the spider collecting fame.
Well, maybe he can hop over to fucking Brody Lee's Dork Order.
Also, Primo and Epico Cologne. Mike and Maria Kanellis, although I guess it's Mike Bennett and Maria Kanellis.
Yeah, and when wrestling resumes, he's such a talented guy and likes wrestling. When wrestling resumes, I hope he goes someplace that will appreciate him as a quality talent and a person.
Zack Ryder, who I'm assuming will go to AEW because he's friends with Cody, and Cody hires all of his friends.
Well, there you go. As long as you're a friend of one of the VPs, you'll always have a safety blanket.
I don't think you know this man. No Way Jose?
No way, Jose. I don't know him.
And here's a guy who I think has a world of talent and has been just horribly misused for a long period of time. Rusev.
I thought he was a top guy.
I thought he should have been a top guy. They don't know how to treat top guys there. That's one of their problems. Obviously, several writers apparently have been let go. And then in terms of...
Oh, I got to say this. I saw one... They apparently have... There's a female writer on the writing staff. That's a novel idea. They didn't have that when I was around. But anyway... She said, after 4 months, my tenure has come to an end or whatever. Thank everybody. I'm so glad that I was able to work on a storyline that resonated with people. And she put like hashtag Otis and Mandy. So now we know who was to blame for that fucking falderall. But they've got writers that contributed to a storyline. How many fucking writers have they got that one writer can, the only thing she's done in 4 months is contribute to one storyline?
You could look at
what the fuck?
You could look at any period of wrestling where it was successful, even Vince's vision of wrestling. And even if you want to say the Vince Russo era, 2 writers. You know, they don't need all these writers. You want to lay off the wrestlers? Lay off all the writers.
Lay off all the writers.
In terms of producers.
And have Ernie Ladd give the 2 wrestlers a finish and let them have their match. Anyway, producers.
These are the producers that have been put on furlough. Lance Storm, Billy Kidman, Mike Rotunda, and, you know, a funny little thing here. He was laid off on April 15th, so IRS got furloughed on tax day.
Oh, that's terrible.
Dave Fit Finley, Pat
Fit?
Buck.
Wait, Fit?
Fit Finley, furloughed. Pat Buck, Sean Davari, Scott Armstrong, Sarah Stock, and Shane Helms. You know, a couple interesting things there. I guess Scott Armstrong furloughed, but Brian Armstrong, I believe, is still there. And in terms of other agents, I know Adam Pearce isn't on this list, so he would still be there.
Apparently they figure, well, if we're only going to do a fucking, you know, 1 show a week or whatever, we only need a couple of agents. But here's that Fit Finley. He's been there for, 20 fucking years almost. When people do something for you, for your major company, this ain't a deal like Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Oh, shit, we can't afford, fucking soft drinks next week. They've been there for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, case of Kyoto or fucking Fit or whatever. And all of the pandemic comes up and suddenly after 4 weeks, nope, you're done. We ain't going to pay you for a while. What the fuck?
And
imagine if he still had the fucking $300 million he wasted on the fucking football, trying to do something else besides wrestling that we keep talking about never works out.
Well, that's the thing. He has the money to be able to pay all these people. And if you had to get rid of people, now isn't the time, especially when you put out a statement bragging that you have access to $500 million. But Jim.
Yeah. And the president of the United States you've got access to. But we can't afford poor Fit.
Unfortunately, it appears that your audio keeps going in and out. We may be having a sign from above.
A sign!
That it may be close to time to wrap up this show, so I'm going to turn over the floor to you. Those are the names of the people that have been laid off, furloughed. The WWE, we'll see how things go in the future now, how many more people get laid off, if anybody, but any closing thoughts as we wrap up the experience?
Yes, if you were thinking about not voting in November, please do, because the President of the United States now has Vince McMahon advising him on shit. So we must do something about this. And, I advise everybody in the wrestling business that's been seen by any amount of people, go into business for yourself and do your own thing and fuck these fucking companies and come up with some way to market yourself and your notoriety so that you don't have to fucking deal with these people because they will cut your nuts off or your nards in a fucking second whenever it's convenient for them. And nobody's going to be holding any benefits for Vince in the near future. So that's my advice to everybody. And if my audio's going bad, that is a sign, and I got to get back to the fucking DVD mines. So for this week until the drive-through where we'll give you an update on everything, please don't send me any fucking money, at least for the next 3 days. I'm begging you. And otherwise, thank you. Fuck you. Bye-bye, everybody.